Hey everybody, hey guys, it's Megan Fox, and something really cool happened to me today. A dream come true, and I wanted to share it with you. So it's really funny how this happened because I listen to Rush Limbaugh every day, and I have since I was about 15. Okay, so I'm a Rush baby. I've been listening to him just forever. I remember my sister introduced me to him when she was in college, and anyway, I took to listening to him before, during school, and just whenever I could. And when I turned, I don't remember, I think it was about 21 or 22, I got an opportunity to work for a company called Premier Radio Networks and in Chicago, and I took that job, and it turned out that I was in the marketing department for Rush Limbaugh, Dr. Laura and Jim Rome, and Michael Reagan. That's right, Michael Reagan was there too. And they were all over the country, and we were the marketing office in Chicago, so I got to talk to most of the air talent on the phone because I would do things like book hotel rooms and things like that for them. But Rush had his own staff, and so I didn't have much interaction with him. Some of his staff I did. But I got the opportunity to meet him a couple times, which was great. He's fantastic. He's just like you think he would be if you're a fan. He's nothing at all like his detractors think he is. So anyway, I then went to work for WLS in Chicago. It's a talk radio station, very famous. And while I was there, I was able to do a meet and greet with Rush Limbaugh sponsors and Rush himself. So it was like the third time I got to meet him. He came to Chicago, and I had this event planned and a party that I did, and he sat there and signed everybody's everything. And he was there to be inducted into the National Radio Hall of Fame. And I remember he was late that night for his own induction because we had such a crush of people, but he wanted to get to every single person. So he stayed anyway and was late. So yeah, I'm filming in my bathroom because the kids are sleeping and I don't want to wake them up. So this is the place where I can be the most quiet without bothering anyone. So anyway, so today, it's been a long time since I left working for Premier and for WLS. And I have always loved broadcasting, always loved radio. And of course, Rush is the pinnacle, right? He's like the best. And I would say it was a couple months ago when he started mentioning PJ Media pretty regularly. And my editor's articles he started reading, and I was like, oh my gosh, please God, let him read one of mine. Please God. And then today, this happened. So what's nuts about this is that I'm a 24/7 member on rushlimbaugh.com, which means that I can get his podcasts every single day. I don't get to listen to him live because I am always doing school with my kids at that time. So I always listen later. Well, I was listening to yesterday's program today because he had an extra hour. He had a fourth hour, which he hardly ever does, but he did it yesterday, and I remember looking at it this morning on my phone going, oh, could today get any better? There's an extra hour of Rush. How great is this? And so I was listening to that and folding laundry, and all of a sudden my phone started to blow up. Oh my God, Rush is talking about you. Oh my God. And so I had to flip over real quick, but I missed the beginning. But what's hilarious is that, so I listened to that, and then I was waiting for it to be uploaded for the podcast, and I went back to listening to the fourth hour from yesterday, and sure enough, he did it again in the fourth hour. So the first clip I'm going to play for you is yesterday's fourth hour, which is something that only Rush 24/7 subscribers get to hear. So this is a treat for you if you are not a 24/7 subscriber. This is unheard of by anybody except subscribers. So this is the first one, and then I'll play the second one for you. It's coming soon. I didn't get to watch this before. I'm watching the Ditto Cam. I have no way to show you the Ditto Cam, though, because I can't download it. It's too bad, because this is cool.
Except what he's saying here doesn't provide.
I didn't get to see him do this before. Oh, God, I might cry.
For winning. Oh, I was looking at this the other day.
Here it is.
The fourth hour, I get into this with literally no compunction whatsoever. It's from PJ Media, Megan Fox, but she's actually referencing a Los Angeles Times story. Are you ready for the headline? Anal cancer, the new gay epidemic the media won't talk about. That's not a National Enquirer headline. That's PJ Media. I mean, Andy McCarthy writes for PJ Media. It's Roger Simon's piece. It's a highbrow piece, a highbrow place. The Los Angeles Times, this is the beginning of the piece. Los Angeles Times calls anal cancer the next big crisis for the gay community. According to the American Cancer Society, the future looks grim. And here's a quote. The American Cancer Society estimates there will be 8,200 new anal cancer cases.
Okay, I'm trying not to smile because this is a very serious topic. I'm only laughing and smiling because, hello, it's Rush, my hero. And he's reading my words. He reads like the whole thing. So if I'm smiling inappropriately, it's not at the anal cancer, believe me, because this is an important story. So let's continue.
In 2017. In the absence of national screening recommendations, more than 50% of these individuals will be diagnosed at stage 3 or 4, when 5-year survival is less than 40%. This creates a major public health concern. Now back to the piece by Megan Fox. The study shows that anal cancer comes from the sexually transmitted virus HPV. Uh-oh. What it doesn't mention is why the gay community is so susceptible to contracting HPV. Perhaps the answer is too politically incorrect for the LA Times. In other words, Megan Fox is saying that there's a report in the Cancer Society that the next big crisis is anal cancer. But the LA Times doesn't report why. They don't say that anal cancer, the majority of cases, are coming from sexually transmitted virus HPV, and they don't say that the gay community is most susceptible to contracting HPV because none of that's in the story. It's just a story about anal cancer as though it's a separate, but no explanation in the LA Times story for why. And Megan Fox here at PJ Media is explaining, hey, if you read the LA Times story, they didn't tell you 90% of it here, gang. Here's the rest of this. That's what her piece is about. NBC reported on a similar study that was done in Hawaii involving women who contracted anal HPV. They also danced around the cause. NBC did. NBC, do I have the second page for this? NBC, here's their report. It's not clear exactly how the women contracted anal HPV. Those who developed infections are more likely to be young and white, with lower levels of education and income, and a history of multiple sexual partner studies show, but we still can't figure out why they... It's like 10 guys named Mahmoud Abdul Hakim, and we can't figure out if there's a terrorist among them. Women who engaged in anal sex were also at higher risk although transmission could have occurred in other non-sexual ways. The findings are important because anal HPV infection is strongly linked with anal cancer. That's the NBC story. They're reporting the rise in incident, but they are getting nowhere near.
I'm taking screen
Who is contracting it and why? Non-sexual ways, Megan Fox writing, really? Non-sexual ways? What ways were those? The article does not elaborate, but goes out of its way to deny the very findings discovered. So here's her conclusion. So what we have here is a clear warning that putting things in... Let me reword. What we have is a clear warning that putting things where they don't belong could be a bad idea, and yet the media is unable to report that clearly. Why? Could it be that the LGBTQ WTF, that's her own, that's funny, the LGBTQ WTF. Could it be that that lobby doesn't want the media to share the details? Researching the negative effects of this is darn near impossible. Very little is written on the subject, even though we know of infections and other things are common. No one will report on it. Instead, Teen Vogue magazine is writing how-to guides about anal sex and cancer for your minor daughters. And then Megan Fox at PJ Media, if you want to know the truth, it still exists. It's on the American Cancer Society's website. Until the Gestapo find out somebody is telling the truth and put the kibosh on it. It's pretty funny. LGBTQWT. The Gestapo. Okay, let's see.
Does it get any better than that? I made Rush laugh. I made the Doctor of Democracy chuckle quite a bit. Oh, that was fun to watch. I hadn't seen his face, so I took a bunch of screen grabs. So we'll put them up here, but it was a good day. Yeah, it's a good day. So that was fun. Okay, so then that was in the 4th hour that is not broadcast on the air. And then there's another, he did it again today. So that's the one where my phone was blowing up and then I had to turn over to the live show to hear that. So I'll play that one next. Okay, let's see if I can get this working. That was so fun. Oh my gosh. He was laughing. My life is complete. And of course I couldn't let my kids hear it. Oh, they would have gone crazy, but of course it wasn't for them. And in fact, in the live one, it's so funny because whenever he does that countdown where he tells you to turn off the radio because there's something bad coming up in case you have kids in the car, I always laugh so hard. And so the first article that I ever wrote that he was going to read, he does this too. It's so funny. Here we go. This is when he did it again today.
Might offend you, and that's never our intent here. It is going to involve discussions of a particular body area. It's medical news, but as is everything in our country, it's going to become politicized if it hasn't already. And rather than just hit you with it and have some of you be uncomfortable, you might have your kids in the car picking them up for school or what have you. And I just want to give you fair warning that it's coming up. And if you'd rather not listen, then you turn the radio off. Don't go to another channel. There's nothing else out there worth listening to. Don't go to another channel. Just turn the radio off. Now, I don't know for how long. I mean, it may be 10 minutes. There are two particular things here that they're somewhat related, not by me. The proponents in both these stories have linked these two things, which is why I'm linking them in this discussion. So what I always do in a circumstance like this, I count down, giving you ample time to turn off your radio or turn down the volume.
Oh,
as I say, don't tune to another station. There's nothing else out there worth listening to. So I'm going to count down from 5. And then if you stay and you are made uncomfortable or you are offended, it's on you. because you have been warned. There's no trickonology being used here. There's no trickery. And if after you don't turn the radio off and you hear, and here we go, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here is the headline. It's a story that runs on PJ Media, written by Megan Fox, but Megan Fox is actually bouncing off of a story that ran in the Los Angeles Times. And the Los Angeles Times story says that anal cancer is the next big crisis for the gay community. Now, I want to be clear. This is a story in the LA Times. Remember back with Barack the Magic Negro, our white comedian Paul Shankly created maybe one of the best all-time parodies with Al Sharpton singing the song, and everybody thought that we were calling Obama the Magic Negro, and we weren't. There was a column in the LA Times written by a black columnist who referred to Obama that way, and we constantly referenced that. But even so, people blamed me for creating the whole. I'd never heard of the term until that column. Well, likewise, this is a story that runs in the LA Times that Megan Fox of PJ Media is commenting on. Anal cancer, the new gay epidemic the media will not talk about. The Los Angeles Times calls anal cancer the next big crisis for the gay community. According to the American Cancer Society, the future looks grim. The LA Times published the following. The American Cancer Society estimates that there will be 8,200 new anal cancer cases in 2017. In the absence of national screening recommendations, more than 50% of these individuals will be diagnosed at stage 3 or 4 when 5-year survival is less than 40%. This creates a major public health concern. The focal point of the story is that people who know this are not covering it. They're not reporting it for the obvious reasons. Now, you remember back in the 80s, some of you may not because you were too young or not maybe even born yet, but when the AIDS epidemic broke out, it was immediately politicized and blamed on Ronald Reagan.
I remember.
Who was the president at the time.
Yes, they did.
And the people politicizing it claimed that AIDS spread because Reagan didn't care about it and because Reagan didn't talk about it. And since Reagan didn't talk about it, there was no public consciousness raised about it. And since Reagan didn't talk about it, it was kept under the radar, and people who needed to know of the dangers of HIV didn't know because Reagan didn't talk about it. And the reason Reagan didn't talk about it is because Reagan didn't like homosexuals. That was the narrative.
Oh my gosh. I forgot my coffee mug. Of all the days that I don't have my Rush Limbaugh coffee mug, today is not the day to forget this. Okay, I have to go get it. Hold on. I need a cup of coffee anyway. I'll be back. All right. We're back. I opted for tea instead of coffee since it is bedtime soon. Sleepy time is my tea of choice. Let's continue.
That was the story, and it lasted for years. 60 Minutes even did a piece with Paul Michael Glazer, who was in Starsky and Hutch, and his wife Elizabeth, who had contracted AIDS in a blood transfusion.
I remember.
And there was a profile on these two, and they had a meeting with President Reagan, and they were imploring him to care. They were imploring him to do something about it. They were imploring him to speak about it. So the narrative clearly was that AIDS was spreading because a Republican president didn't talk about it. And the reason the Republican president didn't talk about it is because he didn't care. So now here we are, some 40, 30, whatever it is, years later, 25, 30 years later, And the LA Times has a story, anal cancer, the new gay epidemic the media won't talk about. The media is not talking about it now. And that's the focal point of the LA Times story, despite abundant warnings from the American Cancer Society.
Okay, stop. So he got thrown off here. I'm not correcting Rush because Rush is hardly ever wrong. But he got a little bit thrown off. Something distracted him, you could tell in the video. And he said that was the point of the LA Times article, but he meant to say that was the point of my article. Because the LA Times article, of course, did not point out the real reason for the increase in cancer and why it's such a high risk in the gay community. It was me that pointed out that. And he meant to say that. It was a mistake. It was an oversight. But he says it a couple times here, which you could tell in the other one he had it totally right. And in this one, something distracted him off camera. And so he got a little bit lost with the LA Times versus what I wrote. But that's what he meant.
The study shows that anal cancer comes from the sexually transmitted virus HPV. This is an American Cancer Society study. It's not. It's nothing to do with the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. The study shows anal cancer comes from the sexually transmitted virus HPV. What it doesn't mention, what the study doesn't mention, is why the gay community is so susceptible to contracting HPV. And the LA Times doesn't either.
This is where he got thrown off. The LA Times article does not mention how they get it, HPV. The American Cancer Society study does. The American Cancer Society says very clearly that the gay community is at high risk because of anal sex. That's what it says. The LA Times, though, did not report that part of the study. I read the study. And neither did NBC report that part of the study. In fact, they danced around it ridiculously, saying that, well, we don't really know how anal HPV is contracted. Yeah, the American Cancer Society says it knows, and that was the study. So, yeah, this is where he gets a little turned around in the live show today. But in the fourth hour yesterday, he had it perfect, which you just heard.
Maybe the answer is too politically incorrect for the LA Times. NBC reported on a similar study that was done in Hawaii involving women who contracted anal HPV. They danced around the cause in almost every laughable way, writes Megan Fox. Now, that also has a correlation. If you go back to the AIDS epidemic, remember, one of the attempts to politicize AIDS was and there were all kinds of medical officials, doctors and other clinicians and people doing studies. Do you remember, Mr. Sturdley, they were predicting that AIDS was going to really spread in the heterosexual community. The political requirement back then was to do whatever it took to obscure the fact that AIDS was primarily affecting homosexuals. That we couldn't have that. So there were all of these predictions, and the media rabidly took them up and spread them. The problem is, it never happened. All of those predictions never happened. AIDS and HIV did not spread by virtue of sexual activity. It did spread to some degree in the heterosexual community from dirty needles among drug users and blood transfusions that were tainted before anybody had a test for it. But heterosexual sexual activity was never, ever able to be blamed, though the effort was made. That's what this story, NBC reporting a similar study that was done in Hawaii involving women who contracted anal HPV. So what's going on there? It's another similar way that they're trying to what's the word, deflect the story. An NBC story said this: it's not clear exactly how the women contracted anal HPV. Those who did develop infections are more likely to be young and white with lower levels of education and income, and a history of multiple sexual partners, the study showed. Women who engaged in anal sex were also at higher risk, though transmission could have occurred in other non-sexual ways. The findings are important because anal HPV infection is strongly linked with anal cancer. That is all NBC had to say about it. NBC's report focused on, hey, women are getting it too, and nobody knows clearly why, but look who they are. They're white, they're not very educated, and they're promiscuous. Non-sexual ways. What were the non-sexual ways women were coming down with anal cancer? The article does not elaborate. The LA Times article doesn't elaborate, but the LA Times article goes out of its way to deny the very findings discovered. To wit, the Hawaii study showed a greater risk of HPV infection, which leads to anal cancer, in women who recently had anal sex, though the association wasn't as high as researchers expected. Non-penetrative sex and use of fingers and sex toys also may have contributed to the transmission of HPV, or the virus could have been shed from cervical secretions, the report said. It's also possible that responses to our questions regarding anal sex were less than candid, the authors of the survey wrote. Study participants were twice as likely to contract the high-risk strains of the HPV virus associated with cervical and other cancers than the low-risk variations. So, here's the bottom line. What we have here, according to Megan Fox at PJ Media, we have here a clear warning that anal sexual activity now has a consequence: rising incidence of anal cancer.
Incurable.
And Megan Fox says, why? Could it be that the LGBTQWTF, the LGBTQWTF, you know what WTF stands for?
I love
the
that she's
LGBTQ and WTF lobby doesn't want
it's good stuff.
People to understand what is happening here. Researching the negative effects of anal sex is darn near impossible. Very little is written on it, even though we know of diseases that
You're
are
skipping
common.
over the
No
actual
one will report on
problems.
It. Instead, get this, Teen Vogue is now actually publishing how-to guides about anal sex and cancer for minor daughters.
I need to stop here
and it's
for a second, too. The way I wrote that doesn't translate well over radio. I even thought to myself, why does he keep saying that Teen Vogue published a how-to guide for anal sex and cancer? But when I wrote it that they had published a how-to guide for anal sex, and then I put in parentheses, and cancer. Like, they didn't mean it to be about cancer, but of course now we find out there's a correlation. So it doesn't translate well over the radio. It sounds like the article was about cancer, but it wasn't. The Teen Vogue article was about how to teach kids, young teenage girls, how to have anal sex. And none of it was about the fact that it could be dangerous or hurt you or kill you or give you fissures or prolapse or, all these other things that come with it. And now cancer. So it just didn't translate over radio, so I didn't want you to be confused about that. But I probably should have written a how-to guide for anal sex in parentheses and also how to get cancer. That probably would have come across better, more sarcastic. When you're reading it, you get it. When you're reading it out loud, not so much. Lesson learned. Okay, moving on.
As if you want to know the truth, it still exists on the American Cancer Society's website until the Gestapo finds someone is telling the truth and they'll do something about it. So the point of this is, and the reason I mentioned Reagan and AIDS, back in the AIDS epidemic...
Okay, stop it there. So that was it. And, it's been a long time since I've heard him actually read an entire article, and he pretty much only skipped over a couple of words that he didn't want to say out loud on the air. I'm going to link it right here for you guys, so you can go read the original article, but I just wanted to share it with you because it was a really big day for me, and I'm really excited. My kids, it's really funny because I really wish I could let my kids listen to it, but I can't, of course, because it's an adult topic. But my kids listen to Rush with me, when we're in the car. And I mean, Rush is a part of our lives. He's been a part of our lives forever. And he's so much a part of our lives that when I took my oldest daughter she's almost 12 now, but when she was about 4 or 5, we took our first trip to Disney World. And we were headed to Florida, and she asked me, Mom, are we going to see Rush? Because she knows that he lives in Florida, and the fact that we listen to him every day, she just assumed that I could just drop in and go see him whenever we wanted to. And what was really funny was that here's this little baby going to Disney World, and she was disappointed when I told her we couldn't go see Rush. I really think it would have been like a Disney World trip for her to go and see him. So Rush, if you're listening, I got a little girl who would just be over the moon to get an invitation down to Palm Beach. We're not holding our breath, but just saying. Good night.